All right. All right, call to order for the Watertown City Council. We'll ask everyone to please rise as Councilman Shuddy says a prayer.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day you've given us to live and move about wherever you call us to. And tonight we gather, the freedom we have to gather and to be able to make decisions to help serve a community. Lord, you've given us the freedom to do this, and we thank you for that. And now I just ask for wisdom tonight for all of us that are involved here this evening, Lord, wisdom to be able to follow your leading and guide us down whatever, even unforeseen paths, Lord. Help us to have discernment, even in clarity, on where we may be going in the weeks and months and years to come. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
We'll ask our finance officer to call the roll.
Okay. Bueller. Here. Danforth.
Here.
Pauline.
Here.
Paulson.
Here.
Shuddy.
Here.
Tupper.
Here.
Vilhauer.
Here.
Thank you.
Quorum is present. The chair will entertain a motion for the approval of the consent agenda. Moved by Councilman Bueller. Seconded by Councilman Tupper. All those in favor, please. Oh, Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out, in the July 19th minutes, Don Eggert's name is spelled incorrectly under the public comments. It's E-G-E-R-T. So, minor correction, but point that out.
Will we get that corrected? Thank you very much for noticing that. Any further comment on the approval of the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We'll start the meeting with public comments. Anyone wishing to come forward and address the council with matters pertaining to the governance of the city of Watertown is invited to do so now. Just please say your name and keep your comments to the point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Val Gronke, and I am here for the Watertown Senior Activity Center. I am here for two things. First, I would like to update you on the status of our new building. The committee has picked out flooring for the main commons area only. Jesse will polish the cement for the rest of the building. This is due to cost savings. They told us the ceiling will be painted black to cover up any piping, ductwork, and wiring from being so noticeable. We have chosen a light gray for the walls, while commercial rubber mop boards in a darker gray. We will have metal doors and framing because they are more durable. The contractor is currently having a little bit of problem getting supplies, so they have moved our earliest move date to September 1st now. The second thing that I would like to review are all the items that are needed in the new building. We're getting all our items in Watertown. We're buying local. We feel that at the center that our community and our city council will support us, and we want to also support them back. An unexpected expense in networking we have to do in the building. This is not done by the cable provider. We are informed that the city is not in charge of this building, so they will not do it. So we had to connect to Connecting Point. They estimated this cost at $5,832.48. Another surprise, we needed special lights in the pool room over the tables, and this comes at an expense of $1,384.50. They will be coming from J.H. Larson. A new bingo machine cost is $15,704.06. We had ordered this. The bingo machine will be coming from Watertown Wholesale. Watertown Wholesale is donating the setup and wiring that is estimated value of $2,000. 4 smart TVs have been ordered from Dugan's. This is needed for bingo, movie night, and senior yoga. The cost of the TVs, 3 mounting brackets, installation, and tax would be $3,312.11. At this time, no donation has been received from Dugan's. One TV must be mounted on a swing arm bracket, and this would be coming from Target for the cost of $436.64. A PA system was donated by Advantera, and they also will do the installation at no cost. They are giving us 2 new office chairs and desks, along with 2 TVs for the Wii machines. We are estimating this value to be around $10,000. Carts for the bingo lunch is needed because of the lack of kitchen counter space. This is at a discounted price from Maxwell Food of $1,921.98. Randy Tupper is going to help us find some movers for the pool tables. And it sounds like Jesse Craig will be able to get us some guys to help move the big items. A moving container will be provided by Easy Store at no cost. All we have to do is feed the guys, and we're estimating the cost of pizzas around $150. We're guessing we're going to have about 10 to 12 helpers. For the office, we need 2 laptop computers, a printer, 2 monitors, software setup. With this is the cost of $4,949.81, which is coming from Connecting Point. They are going to be donating $150 in labor. We would like to get iPads for classes to teach our members how to download books from the library, also teach them how to connect to their family on FaceTime. This would be at a cost of $553.76. This would also come from Target. We did get gift cards from them, and that is listed below. Janitor floor cleaning machine would be $5,324.99. This would also be coming from Watertown Wholesale. Pool players need 4 tall tables, 8 tall chairs at a cost of $1,705.50 from Maxwell also, and this is giving us a discount price from them. We'll need 2 sewing machines with cabinets, and this would be about $3,618.87 coming from Needlework Sewing. They gave us $300 off of the 2 machines at this price. Currently, the ladies are using their personal machines. Last, but mostly very important, is donor plaques. We had an estimate of $1,224.75. This would be for 5 boards, 18 by 24, and then a center category with the centerpiece shaping like Lake Compesca, and our name would be engraved in it. This would be coming from Nate Graff. The total we need in purchasing of all the items is $56,119.10. We have been given donations so far from Jesse Craig of $15,000, Advantera for $10,000 in equipment, Crawford Ostis Funeral Home for $1,500, Great Western Bank for $500, Sanford for $500, Hartley Trucking for $500, Reliabank for $300, Watertown Ford and Chrysler for $250, Brigman Insurance for $100. Target gave us 2 gift cards totaling $50, and our members have donated a total of $2,174.86, making total in donations $31,274.86. County Fair has donated hamburgers and brats for grilling to have a free will donation grill out where we made $1,812.25. But as you see, we are still short funds and need your help. We hope that the city can help us along with our community to complete these needs. We still are short $23,031.99. You can send your donations to the Watertown Senior Activity Center or drop it off at 301 East Kemp, Watertown. I would like to thank, first of all, the council and the mayor for letting us tell you the status of the center and hoping that everybody's hearts will be able to come out and help us. I have given each one of you a short list here. It shows the breakdown of what we need, what our donations and our fundraisers, and with the balance we still need. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. One word of warning, if you have 10 or 12 guys helping you move, $150 for pizza might not be enough. But as the city of Watertown had previously donated money to this cause, I thought that this could be construed as the governor. Well,
No, we did not get any of that. We did not get any of that money. That money all went to ICAP. None of it went to the senior center.
The ICAP money was all for food service items, correct, for the 60-plus dining?
For the 60-plus dining,
okay,
that's where that money went.
okay. Thank you very much. With that, the chair will. Is there anyone else for public comments? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda. Moved by Councilman Vilhauer. Seconded by Councilman Bueller. Any comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. The first item on the regular agenda is an application for a special event retail license to Shamrocks and Edelweiss Corporation from 4 p.m. Saturday, August 28th, 2021 until 12 a.m. Sunday, August 29th, 2021 to be held at Coddington County Expo at 1910 West Kemp.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilman Vilhauer. Any second? Seconded by Councilman Paulson. We'll start the hearing with our should we have public testimony first, or? We'll start with public testimony. So, anyone here to speak on this item publicly? Just make sure we know your name, but please announce yourself to the public and your relation to this topic.
Lisa Carrico, formerly a board member of the Boys and Girls Club. I actually resigned at the end of June. However, I am involved both with Dempsey's and with the Boys and Girls Club. It's that time of year again, and we are holding the camel races. And Dempsey's graciously offered to run the bar for that event. It's pretty much a responsible, fun, casual, good fundraising event for us. It'll be held on August 28th, as in the application. And I invite all of you to come. It's a lot of fun, and some of you have. I know some of you have been there before and have had a good time. And I know Councilman Tupper has volunteered his time at our event every year. And so that's all there is for that, other than, you know, we're all good to go if you guys are good for us to go. Our only other comment, which isn't entirely related but is related to the Boys and Girls Club, I did want to take this opportunity to thank you to the council, albeit the former council, but some of you have carried over, for including in your capital improvement budget our roof at the facility. I can't tell you how over the moon excited the board was and the staff. We are just totally jazzed about that, and as far as I know, it went along pretty well without a hitch, and I just wanted to take that time to thank you guys. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Would our finance officer, Christine Bobzien, like to comment on this?
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing really to add. Lisa covered it all. So standard, everything was turned in, everything was publicly noticed, so no comments from finance.
Thank you very much. Anyone else here to testify on this topic? Seeing none, open it up for questions from the council. Councilman Bueller.
Oh, I just wanted to thank Lisa for her service to the Boys and Girls Club Board. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. As I understand it, because this is on county property, the Board of Commissioners approved this at their meeting last week for use of their facility.
I can't remember if it's last week or it'll be at the next meeting in August, before the event, though.
I think it was on the. 'Cause
Okay. That I couldn't
was
remember.
I was listening to the meeting when it was approved.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, we'll close the testimony and open it up for council, actually vote from the council. So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Second item on the agenda tonight is a second reading of ordinance number 21-13, an ordinance amendment to chapter 5.03, summary of district regulations of the revised ordinances of the city of Watertown to clarify and establish street cut procedures and limitations. Chair will take a motion. Moved by Councilman Schutte, seconded by Councilman Danforth. Open it up for public testimony, and we'll start with our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Thank you, Mayor. If you recall, the first reading on this item was a couple meetings ago. It happened, I believe, first meeting in July. And we've brought it back now with a few slight modifications to help address some of the questions that the council members had during first reading. We also provided some points of clarity throughout the ordinance amendment that it helped, excuse me, that also helped to address some of the comments that we received from Watertown Municipal Utilities. Justin Peterson, the Assistant City Engineer's been working primarily on this draft ordinance, along with our prior Assistant City Engineer, Colin Paulson, who's a council member now, but who got this draft going for us initially over a year ago. The basis behind this ordinance amendment relates to the street cut permits that we allow for work within the city's right-of-way. We've currently and previously required people to obtain permits for work within the right-of-way. That includes work to actually cut into the asphalt, to do utility work, to install new sewer service lines, water service lines, things of that nature. And it also includes work related to stockpile materials in the street, any curb and gutter or sidewalk work within the right-of-way, and installing new driveways or things of that nature. The main components of this ordinance amendment, since we've had these permits in place, one of the things we found we've been in need of is a moratorium or a prohibition of cutting into a new street. We found in the past that we'd pave or repave a road, and then days later, in some instances, we've had people come in and cut into that brand new asphalt road. And that's really the heart of what these ordinance amendments are trying to address, is to put some structure in the ordinance that allows city engineering staff to prohibit that kind of activity. Now, under certain circumstances, there are waivers or exemptions in the ordinance that allow for them to apply to the city engineer if there happens to be a new street and there does need to be access to a utility within that street under certain circumstances and there are no other options available. Those types of scenarios are accounted for in this ordinance as well, and allows the applicant to pursue that with the city engineering office. With that, like I'd mentioned, Justin Peterson that did a lot of work on this. He's online with us through Teams, and I think he and I will just stand by for any questions that the council might have.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else present like to testify on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public testimony, open it up for council questions or comments. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess one thing I'm not seeing in there is a compaction requirement. Are we relying on our engineering design standards then for that compaction requirement, or what? I guess is my question.
Director Von Eye, where
Yes.
would you like to answer that question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor, Councilman Paulson. Justin did some research on that, and we looked at several other communities' street cut ordinances and found that very few, I think only one, mentioned anything about compaction. So we did not incorporate any language about compaction in the ordinance. The one city that did cite language simply stated that compaction is required so that the new material is at least as dense or compacted as the adjacent material in the street. Neither Justin or I are opposed to that language. We just kept it out because that seemed universally what other communities had done, is they were just silent on it. It does stand to reason, and to Councilman Paulson's point, from an engineering standpoint, it stands to reason that there would be some compaction effort for any street cut that occurs in our roadways, but we did not incorporate any specific language to that.
Thank you. Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Heath, could you clarify what the permit fee is?
Director Von Eye.
Yes, absolutely. The permit fee varies depending on the type of work. So for an excavation permit where you're going to be digging into the street for utility work, that's $50 for that permit. Then the other ones that I mentioned earlier, like storing materials on the street, that's only $25. And if they're doing any curb and gutter or sidewalk or driveway work, that permit fee is also only $25.
So the violation, so I'm clear, if there's a violation, you double that fee. Now, we have people that do this and try to kind of get under the radar and get it done, if I'm not mistaken. Is that really sufficient? I mean, if it's going to cost me $100 or $50, I'm going to take my chances maybe. Should we give some thought to putting a little bit more meat behind that penalty?
Yeah, I would say that either a combination or in part, whether through the penalty in the ordinance or simply updating the permit fees. $50 for a permit fee, the engineering time to issue the permit, go do a field inspection, depending on the type of work, maybe 2 field inspections. We're probably, I could say confidently, not recouping city staff time with that $50 permit fee. So maybe that alone could be looked at, which of course is adopted through a separate action of the council and not incorporated in this ordinance. But either the permit fee itself or increasing the penalty as listed in this ordinance, I would say you're right, would make sense.
Follow up from Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Von, I guess I would certainly suggest we reconsider and put something more substantial to that, I think. Thank you.
Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Vaughn, I just question, not understanding quite the process. Do the permits that we're talking about, do they come requests from the public, or do they, or do a lot of them come from Watertown Municipal Utilities that they're requesting? And if so, if a lot of them are coming from WMU, does this really have any impact on the work or what we're going to see being done by them versus what's been done in the past? Does my question make sense?
It does, yes. So we do see a mix of applications from the general public or contractors working for the general public, and we also see a great number of a great amount of work in the right-of-way, obviously related to Watertown Municipal Utilities utility work. Now, as far as municipal utilities is concerned, their contractors, according to the ordinance, are supposed to come and receive a permit from the city engineering office to perform that work. Just like any of the other instances, a private contractor doing work for the general public, that sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't. But we're trying to foster a better understanding of that permit requirement out there throughout the community, no matter who the contractor is working for. But the basis behind it is that the contractor doing the work would come and get the permit from the city engineering office, because they're the ones ultimately held responsible and liable for the work that they've done, and the excavation and the backfill and the reconstruction of the work that they demoed.
Any follow-up, Councilman Vilhauer?
Thank you.
Councilman Danforth.
Thank you, Mayor. And if I could, Mayor, I got a number of questions, if I could just address them.
You have leniency.
With this, Heath, I'm assuming the current language has been covered with utilities, municipal utilities. Are they in agreement with that, or are there changes that you referenced at the beginning take care of any concerns that they had?
Yes, that's a great question. They did send Justin an email. Bert, the operations manager there at Utilities, sent Justin a detailed email. And they had a handful of questions and comments and concerns, and Justin was able to address all those and work through them in this final draft that we've got presented here this evening.
Okay. Help me understand here for a second. If I've got a new area that I'm going to develop, and I've got my streets, and I'm going to put my curb and gutter in, and I'm going to put all the infrastructure in, and now I'm going to start selling lots, like we are up northwest of town. Are those roads put in well in advance of when the lots and all the utilities would be put in? Because my understanding was, doesn't the water connection come from the actual straight from the line, or are they stubbing it out to the lots?
Yes.
Utilities, the water connections, because I know they don't want unused stubs, right? With
correct.
valves. So if I'm a developer and I have a new area up there and we put the roads in, now I start selling lots and we start construction, aren't I right away going to be kind of flying in the face of the 5-year moratorium on that road?
Yeah, I think my short answer to that is if the planning up front is done intentionally and well as far as the lot layout is concerned, the coming back and cutting and terminating service lines that aren't going to be utilized is pretty minimal. But there are those instances that do still arise. So when a subdivision comes in and they have their lot layout, they then design that water system to serve a service line per lot. Every lot gets a service line designed and then subsequently constructed. And as soon as those sewer and water mains and services go in, that's when the developer follows up with the roadway construction after that. So everything's there in place according to the plat, and those construction plans match the plat, and everything's in sync. Now, those instances do still arise where a buyer or purchaser of the property wants to buy 2 lots, for example. And that's probably more prevalent in like commercial subdivisions than it is residential. Residential, there are a few more regulations in place where, you know, lot sizes and things like that are held up and make it maybe a little less viable to see those changes in a residential subdivision. But commercial subdivisions, definitely, that happens frequently where commercial lot or land buyer wants something different than what was platted and constructed. So you are right, those are some examples when those instances arise where we need to go back and abandon and terminate a service line that was just installed, sometimes weeks, maybe months prior to that.
Okay. A couple more questions here. What happens if I'm a contractor and I come to you for a permit, tell you what my scope of work is. I get in there, and we also know sometimes the scope of work changes significantly based on what we find. Do they have to come back to you to revise, or are they able to just continue with the changes on the fly, so to speak, as they arise?
So for these permits, since they're working on existing infrastructure, we really don't look at a lot of details as far as we would on new construction or new construction plans that we're approving. So this is just us checking off, knowing that they're there, knowing what they're going to be working on, whether it's the sewer main, the water main, whatever it might be. So really, if they run into something in the field that modifies their construction, it really doesn't cause or necessitate them to come back in and get any kind of an amended permit from us. Now, if the scope of what they were wanting to do maybe is blown up in the field because they have to dig out a whole half a block instead of just the 100 feet they were originally planning for, things like that, they would just communicate to us and let us know so that we know from a street reconstruction standpoint.
Okay, last question. We note that there's a 1-year warranty period in there, and it kind of goes to what Colin was talking about, and that's the compaction. It seems like more times than not, the problems that we see with these things is they sink. So we come in and we backfill and we put blacktop on it and patch it, and then a year later they sink, and now you're constantly running over them. Is our 1-year period sufficient to get through? It would seem like it's not, because so many times we get shrinkage or we're settling. And then we have roads that are rough, so to speak. They aren't to the quality that we would want them to be. So is the 1 year appropriate, or should we look at a longer period of time?
Yes, great question. Again, generally speaking, I'll share a quick story here. In a prior community I worked for, they'd mark on the curb and gutters where the service lines went into the property. They put a W for the water service line and an S for the sanitary sewer service line. The ongoing joke was that it wasn't to indicate where the services are, but it stood for will settle and settled. Because of the trench settlement that often occurs when you install those, if the compaction and backfill isn't done properly, you're right, you end up with that settlement in the roadway. But as far as addressing that, whether your warranty is adequate or not, generally speaking, you're going to see that type of failure within that first year when you go through one freeze-thaw cycle. So any 12-month window from when the work was performed, you should, for the most part, have an indication that there's some kind of failure there underneath the surface. So I would say a combination of knowing that and also having a little bit more proactive efforts on our part as a staff, doing random checks on any one of these permits, for example. We haven't really had the time to do that in the recent past, but we're hoping to as staff is trained and become more comfortable in all the roles that they're performing, we're hoping to have more of a presence on things like this. And just having that presence, observing in the field, making sure contractors are performing some compaction effort, and it looks to be reasonable for the type of material they're using. Things like that I think will go a long way too, in conjunction with the one-year warranty in helping preserve our streets from those failures.
Thank you. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to hit on the planning and kind of the idea behind this being written and implemented now into the city is obviously we're looking for integrity of our streets. We've all heard the discussion on how our streets are, and it's frustrating to see a new road be disturbed immediately, and we've seen it over and over in this community. So we're trying to implement enough planning into everyone, not just the utilities, not just the city side, but hopefully contractors too, where they're saying, all right, we have a new street coming in. Let's make sure that we have a brand new service line or whatever it is to try to prevent this. And obviously that's harder to do with individual homeowners, but this is trying to help to aid the discussion of our street conversation, because our trenches are the biggest issue. Especially, on 19th we had a brand new road and there's 100 trenches in it, and obviously that was an emergency situation, but it just goes to show that if we would have been forward thinking and had planning before we did that project, we could have probably prevented it. And then that kind of goes back to what Mike asked before, how do we prevent that with new construction? And Heath hit on it a little bit. When we get a new plat in, utilities won't approve the water plan, or and the sanitary is not part of that, but the utilities will not approve that water plan, and they will not let us put water services in until that plat is finalized and recorded. And just personally, we just had a case where we're in the process of replatting, and so I met with the utilities on that project site, and it became very aware that, they were thinking through it, making sure that we had enough services, that we weren't going to, go into that new street when we eventually get it paved. So I think that planning is already occurring, but I think that we're on the right track, and I just want to make sure this is right, and that's why I keep hitting on the compaction, because compaction seems to be the biggest downfall.
Thank you. Councilman Schutte.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your work on this, Director Von. Actually, that was one of my concerns in reviewing this, was what Councilman Paulson and Danforth have said with the compaction. You reviewed other cities, and so that may be, I guess, if we review how we go about things and with personnel, maybe just do random checks may work, but I'm concerned about that as well. Is there a way to, is it just reviewing a little more about to make sure we get that portion covered? Because that seems to be a common theme here. That was my concern going into this evening too, just the best way to go about not having issues down the road with the compaction.
Thank you. Director Von Eye, would you like to comment on that at all, or?
Yes, Mayor, I could actually. So Justin had some language slated that I don't have right in front of me here, but we could absolutely add an amendment to this final draft if Matt feels appropriate at this point in time. But adding something in the ordinance as simple as compaction effort shall be applied for any street cut permits that are issued to at least the density of the adjacent material. We could make it that lengthy, or just say compaction effort shall be applied, so that it's at least in writing that the expectation is there. Yes, and as I apologize, city attorney's pointing out some language to me in there, but we do
always
reference
a good thing.
We do reference the engineering design standards. The one fault we have in referencing those is it could be construed to apply to only larger excavations of a certain magnitude that most of these permits might not reach. So we might be better suited by tucking something more into this ordinance that's specific to compaction efforts.
Thank you very much. Councilman Danforth.
Heath, I think a general statement is just, it's too much wiggle room on the backside, in my opinion. I think the more specific we can be as to what's required, the better we are, and the better, you know, we're in a better position in dealing with failure or our perceived failure. The other thing is, and maybe you've touched on that, but we currently have the 1-year warranty thing that we do now, right? I believe we pretty much have lived to that, from my understanding. Do we enforce it? Because you can go all over the place in town where there has been the same type of things we're talking about, where repair has occurred underground there, and just time and time and time and time again, they settle. You know, so it seems like it's there. I'm going to say always. It's probably not always, but so unless we have a means of following up before that 1-year time frame is up, we may have problems that we don't enforce. And so really I would be specific as I could be, and the whole issue then becomes enforcement, is how do we flag it, check it to make sure at the end of 1-year warranty that it's either good or it's not.
It's not really a question. If you had something to add to that, Director Von Ay, you sure could.
I would add, Councilman Danforth, that follow-up and follow-through with the 1-year warranty on these types of cut permits is not as prevalent as we've been able to establish on our developments. So our new development, our new infrastructure, those projects that we're bringing forward to council for acceptance, we've gotten very, very much more systematic on following through with those 1-year warranties. This is one of those, I don't want to say lesser concerns, but it is one that was next on the list to move towards putting more emphasis on. So that's something we're going to definitely be working on with staff. Again, that comes back to the whole presence in the field and having spot inspections and things like that. But following through with each of these permits as far as the warranty is concerned is part of that process as well.
Thank you very much. Any further council questions or comments? Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Van Noy, just one more quick question, kind of relation to this whole situation. We do not allow anybody to stub into the manifold line anymore, like we had issues with on 10th. Is that something people can still do, is to parallel that stub that comes off the main line?
Generally speaking, for all sewer and water connections, they're ran laterally 90 degrees from the main to the property. We try to avoid long, winding service lines running through the right-of-way. For obvious reasons, once we go back into that right-of-way to do work, it creates all kinds of problems in coordinating and facilitating that work. But generally speaking, all new layouts, all the service lines are ran laterally from the mains.
I guess what I was getting at, you can't branch off that line and go parallel to that.
No, correct. Okay, thanks. That's correct.
Thank you. Any further council questions or comments? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a question for our attorney. If we were looking at putting a little bit stronger language in this, can we do it and act on it tonight, or are we going back to a first and second reading process again?
Excuse me. It's Councilman. It's a or Mayor.
City Attorney. Thank you.
Getting used to this. It's a judgment call. If it's minor, it can be inserted and acted upon tonight. If it's a little more substantial, there should be another second reading. So I guess it just kind of depends on what the nature of the insertion would be.
Any follow-up, Councilman Vilhauer?
Well, just a comment, I guess. I guess I would like to see us, rather than trying to rough something out tonight and stick it in, work with the staff and whomever, come back with us if at a second reading at the next meeting would be my recommendation.
In fact, the chair would like to ask the council, there was a lot of very good, legitimate questions on a topic that has been important in Watertown for a while. So I would ask the council if the general mood would be to have this revisited either as more information for us in the future, or there were a couple different things, such as the staff follow-up on some of these locations, being more specific with the some of the language, the monetary penalty, the planning up front, and the 1-year period, is that being sufficient? So these were questions that I think that the council would not mind learning more about or seeing revisited in the future, but I don't want to speak for the entire council unless I am misreading the sentiment. I think generally, I would ask Director Von Eye and City Manager Mack to just keep it on your radar and bring this back up. I know it's an important subject for the city and for a lot of development. So, City Manager Mack, would you like to comment at all?
I'd just like to ask, because there is a motion on the floor, do we need to rescind the motion, or, because we learned we don't want to table it?
So I guess I was trying to clarify what the mayor's intent was. Are you saying pass this, but let's readdress it?
Correct. I mean, we have a motion on the floor, and I think we will vote on that. I do not see any reason to ask for a rescission or revision or even an amendment at this point.
But and I would just say, if you wanted to have staff work on something in the meantime and bring it up for a second reading at the next meeting, you would just motion to postpone to that future date.
Yeah, I just think procedurally that would make more sense than passing it, because then we'd have to go through a first and second reading again, right, on new amendments. Okay.
All right.
I'd make that motion to postpone.
I think the chair can just postpone it until the next meeting, or am I wrong, City Attorney?
I don't believe that's true. I believe there has to be a motion if there's already been a motion. But
yeah, there is a motion on the floor. So, motion to postpone to a time definite next city council meeting.
Correct.
Moved by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Any comments on that motion? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion to postpone action until the next city council meeting, at which point revisions might be considered. All in favor of that, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll revisit this at the next meeting. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is second reading of ordinance number 21-32, a subdivision regulation text amendment to chapter 24.05 general requirements and design standards of the revised ordinances of the City of Watertown, clarifying the floodplain representation requirements on plats. Chair will entertain a motion. Moved by Councilman Danforth, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Open it up for public testimony with our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd give some credit to our urban planner, Brandy Hanton. She's done a lot of work on this ordinance amendment. It specifically relates to how floodplains are identified on plats. We have two different sections that discuss that in our current ordinances. One of them specifically says that the boundary of the floodplain shall be identified on the plat, and the other one generally says that a note will be included on the plat that references the floodplain firm panel number that exists for that platted property. Staff and I would say applicants, developers, surveyors in particular, have had interest in removing the requirement to show the floodplain boundary on the maps. Surveyors have issue with that because it's not a formal part of their survey that they're stamping when they put a plat together. It's work done by others, and for that reason, it causes some concern from them. From a staff standpoint, we recognize and acknowledge that floodplains are amended from time to time, and those boundaries do change over time. So by showing it on a plat with the physical line of the boundary on the plat, having the understanding that that could shift over time, we felt maybe wasn't an appropriate representation of the floodplain. Rather, we would like to, instead, we would like to strike that language from the ordinance. That's what this amendment is doing. And we would retain the ordinance requirement that still lists the floodplain firm panel number on the face of the plat in the notes of the plat. So generally speaking, that helps clean this up a little bit. It takes care of that discrepancy that's in the ordinance, and in a nutshell, we would still have the note indicating a floodplain exists and give the right firm number and remove that requirement of showing the boundary. Brandy's online with us tonight, our urban planner. If we have any questions, her or I can help answer them.
All right. Any other public testimony on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public testimony, open it up for questions or comments from the council. Councilman Tupper.
City Engineer Von I see this was approved by the Plan Commission unanimously.
Correct.
Follow-up? Any other comments or questions from the council? Seeing none, all those in favor, the motion is a revision or an amendment to Chapter 24.05. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is an approval of change order number 1 for the 10th Avenue North Reconstruction Project, project number 2007 with Timmons Construction Incorporated, for a net increase of $13,395.70 for a new contract worth the amount of $2,053,952.16. For that, we'll open up public test. Oh, we need a motion. Moved by Councilman Vilhauer, seconded by Councilman Tupper. We'll open public testimony by going to our Public Works Director, Heath Von I.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a progress change order as the work is commenced on 10th Avenue North. As with any project this magnitude, we always have some reserve money within the budget to account for any overruns or change orders of this nature. I would say that most of these on here are pretty routine as far as the cause for the change orders. Some of it includes additional sidewalk work, some of which will be reimbursed by the homeowner at the end of the project. We have some additional tree work that wasn't anticipated. As the council may very well know, the former council was very well aware of the sensitivity to some of the trees along there. So our consultants did their best in trying to preserve as many trees as possible. It turns out a couple of those we weren't able to preserve and did have to remove, so that created a little bit of additional expense. And then also there were some sanitary sewer adjustments where we shifted from what was planned for having 4-inch sewer service lines ended up being 6-inch. So some of these costs were associated with swapping out the pipe size for those changes. I would note, I did need to make one correction here. The council agenda item shows a change order amount of $13,395.70. We did have to reduce that. We had to redact a couple of these items out of here because they are related to Watertown Municipal Utilities contract, not the city's contract. So we ended up pulling out $5,509.10 worth of work that would go under WMU's contract. That gives us a net change order of $7,886.60. Marcy Luno is the project manager on this, and her and Justin, I believe, are both online, and we'll stand by for any questions.
All right, thank you very much. First, I would entertain a motion to amend this motion to changing $13,395.70 to $7,886.60.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Paulson, seconded by Councilman Tupper. Any comments on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, changing the dollar amount down, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. So now we are on agenda item D as amended. Any council comments or questions? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Von I, question. The homeowners that are going to be assessed for sidewalk, sanitary sewer improvement, et cetera, have they been given a set number already as far as what that cost will be?
The original resolution of necessity did include an estimate. I don't believe we've gone back with any final numbers to them yet, but we would, depending on how the final numbers pan out, we have options in state statute that allows us to continue with the resolution of necessity number or fine tune that based on final costs. And depending on what those final costs are, we would likely come back with an adjusted number.
I guess that's my ultimate question is, are the affected homeowners aware of these potential increased costs being passed on to them?
Yes, so most of these costs here on this change order wouldn't affect anybody's assessment.
It would not.
Well, actually, I'll let Justin chime in on that just to make sure I'm accurate in that statement, if I could, please.
Justin Peterson, would you like to comment?
Actually,
Oh,
I think that's Jason Peterson.
oh, sorry. I thought you said Justin. Sorry.
Oh, I did say Justin. I didn't realize, so Jason Peterson, our consultant from CDI, is apparently online with us too, so we can defer to him as well.
Very sorry. Please go ahead.
Okay. So Jason Peterson, Civil Design Inc. The sanitary services that we are talking about, when those got dug up, we found that those were, some of them were 6-inch. And in our plans, we had included 4-inch. 4-inch is a typical residential size. And so it was determined that we would use 6-inch service pipe in order to tie these back in. So I guess I don't know how the assessment would be affected by that, but there is some increases in cost due to the increases in size.
Councilman Vilhoward?
I guess my only concern is I don't want homeowners all of a sudden getting hit with an additional surprise. It sounds like that is not going to be the case.
Yeah, and Justin or Marcy would know more on the assessment side of things. I guess, would either of you care to speak to, do you know if some of these, what we thought were 4-inch end up being 6-inch are in fact related to properties that we'll be assessing? Justin or Marcy?
And you're also referencing sidewalk work as well too in this.
Justin or Marcy, are you guys, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, this is Justin. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. This is Assistant City Engineer Justin Peterson for those watching from home.
So I believe the way the resolution is written is that it would the service lines would be could be assessed to the homeowner, and so the 6-inch the increase in cost I think would be transmitted to the homeowner, assessed to the homeowner.
So to Councilman Vilhauer's point, we could, if we haven't already, reach out to those homeowners to let them know that there will be some slight modification to their assessments. Correct, Justin?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. I guess that's all I would ask, was that they be kept in the loop on possible implications to them.
Councilman Tupper?
Director Von I think to go back to Glenn's original question, on which I also have a question of that though too, is the item B, concrete sidewalk with an additional $3,752.50. Is that, take it that's going to be assessed at a higher rate than what originally estimate was?
Yes, I'll let Justin speak to that as well. There was a couple different properties on the project that actually requested additional sidewalk work to be done. But I'll pass it off to Justin too, if you could speak to that, Justin.
Yes, Keith, that is correct. There's a couple of homeowners that asked for additional sidewalk, and this cost would be relayed or assessed back to them. I think the discussions that we've had with the particular homeowner is that they'd reimburse the city at the end of the project. So technically it wouldn't even be assessed. It just would be paid by the homeowner at the end.
To those particular ones that asked for that. Thank you.
Correct.
Our finance officer, Kristen Bobzien, would like to weigh in on this.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add a little bit more to the assessment process. So this is the common way that it works. Normally we do our resolution of necessity. we get as close as we can to our estimate of what the cost would be to the homeowner. As this happens, I know that they do sometimes make contact, sometimes they don't with the homeowner. I think engineering now will probably go back and determine how much the real value is per owner. It looks like a lot here, but it could end up being, $100, which there again, the resolution of necessity kind of has some language in there too, that they know this isn't it's not exact, it's an estimate. And then what will happen as the project gets closed out and it is finalized, then that resolution comes back. And at that time, if the council had any questions or concerns too, that would be the time where that is the true assessment that goes to the property owner. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further council comments or questions? Seeing none, the motion is to approve this change order as amended. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item E, a first reading of ordinance 21-28, an ordinance adding chapter 7.22 to the revised ordinances of the City of Watertown, creating a process for administrative appeals. This is a first reading, no motion required. We will ask our city attorney, Matt Roby, for comments on this.
Thank you, Mayor. The this change to our ordinance or added section of our ordinance comes to coincide a bit with our change in form of government here. The South Dakota Constitution provides that a home rule charter community can essentially establish a executive, legislative, administrative government that supersedes state law, so long as there's an administrative appeals process that's subject to judicial review. And so, because with this our change in form of government, our 7-member council, city manager form of government is a bit different than what statute calls for, we would be required to have this process. So essentially, the long and short of it is it provides a formal relief valve, I guess, for an aggrieved citizen to appeal through the process and get a final determination by an independent third party of whether or not the process or whether or not a decision was valid. And then if they still disagree with that decision, they can then appeal to the circuit court. One piece that we tweaked since we first considered bringing this forward is I added language that essentially says that no decision is appealable unless there's something specific that says that a certain person in the organization is the final decision maker. For example, I know there's multiple instances where it says the city engineer can approve or deny certain things, but unless there's something specific, no decision would be appealable under this ordinance unless it first goes through the city manager. So any decision that might be made by a subordinate of the city manager they'd still have to seek the city manager's input and give her the chance to overrule the subordinate before they can appeal through this process.
Thank you very much. Any further public testimony? Seeing none, we'll close public testimony, open it up for council questions or comments. Councilman Danforth.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, I got one question. Does that pertain to Board of Adjustments and Plan Commission, or is that excluded from this?
Yep, and so there's language in here as well that says that unless there's another process provided for, this doesn't apply. So in the case of the Board of Adjustment, decisions of the Board of Adjustment are directly appealable to the circuit court. Yep.
Any follow-up? Seeing none. Councilman Tupper.
City Attorney Roby, does this just apply to this board moving forward or any old ordinances that were in the past?
It applies to, once the ordinance, assuming the ordinance is implemented, it applies to any actions going forward.
Just going forward?
Yeah. And there's a case to be made that as we sit right here today, that a decision of the finance officer is potentially appealable today, directly to the circuit court. Circuit courts in South Dakota operate under the open courts doctrine. They basically will take all comers almost, but this really formalizes the process. So going forward, once this is implemented after publication and effectiveness, a decision that would not otherwise be appealable would go through this process if somebody disagreed with the city manager or a final decision maker.
Any follow-up, Councilman Tupper? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Attorney Roby, one question. Was this just your due diligence that came up with, needing to address this, or was there something specifically that prompted this?
No, I had this on my long to-do list back when we were going through the Home Rule Charter Revision Commission. I stumbled across it. And the street cut ordinance also. Yeah, we talked about, what would the appeal look like from the street cut ordinance with the city engineer's authorities under that ordinance. So that prompted it as well. But I did have it on my list of things to address around this time period from back in 2019. So, plus I read the South Dakota Constitution in bed at night. So no.
Thank you. Any council comments on that last mo? Any further questions or comments from the council? All right, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is another first reading of an ordinance number 21-33, amending the zoning map of the city of Watertown, South Dakota for Lot 8 and a portion of Lot 7 in Block 3 of the plat of Watertown Development Company addition from I-2 Heavy Industrial District to I-1 Light Industrial District. We will start testimony with our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is I call it a simple rezone, as I do oftentimes when these rezones come through, but it does, of course, warrant merit for discussion at both Planning Commission and Council. So this first reading of a rezone for an industrial park area within the city. This is known as the Watertown Development Company Edition, and it is proposed to rezone approximately little less than 7 acres, 6.85 acres from I-2 Heavy Industrial to I-1 Light Industrial. I do have a map for reference that I can share through Teams. And if you can see that on the map, this area that's hatched here is the property to be rezoned. You can see in the zoning designations around here that this darker purple area is what's remaining of I-2 in this district along 21st Street Southwest. So northwest of here is the airport property. Straight north are the some of the ball fields and the complex further north of there. And then, of course, south of the property here on 21st is Highway 212. So this area, this hash, is the area that's proposed to be rezoned, and I believe we did an area up here further northeast in the last couple of years. It was also rezoned from I-2 to I-1. But this was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission and before you tonight for first reading. And again, Brandy Hanton, the urban planner, or I can both help answer any questions.
Anyone else like to comment on this publicly? Seeing none, we'll close public testimony, open it up for council comments or questions. Anything from the council? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the next item on the agenda. Approval of insurance policies and authorization for payment for premiums for general liability, auto liability and physical damage, law enforcement liability, buildings and contents, equipment property damage, and equipment breakdown, boiler and machinery coverage, and authorization for the finance officer to issue a special check. With that, the chair will entertain a motion to approve this. Moved by Councilman Vilhauer, seconded by Councilman Paulson. And we'll open public testimony by going to our finance officer, Kristen Bobzien.
Thank you, Mayor. Before the council tonight is our standard insurance renewal through South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance. The memo that I attached kind of breaks down the increase. It was a 12.3% increase, about $51,000 over last year's premium. Some of that can be equated to, we did do our standard review of all property that happens, I think it's every 5 years, but they go through pretty much with a fine-tooth comb and review all of our physical property, kind of reevaluate it based off there again of its condition and what the market is kind of driven. So some of that, when we talk about our property values went up, that's due to that being done. We also did add some property to the insurance. our new admin building at wastewater, the increase of value there for that, and then also the future City Hall, the old Wells Fargo building. So those were some bigger dollar amounts for our property. Also, a little bit of an increase in our law enforcement liability, and that's due to the 3 new officers that were added to the budget. Other than that, it was a standard renewal. I know the increase seems a little bit high, but I think with having that valuation done, our loss credit did come back at 21,000. So with everything, I feel like it's good. We've always been happy with South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance, and I think they do a good job. I will say too that the numbers were provided to the Watertown Municipal Utilities, and they came back and had no disagreement with their premium either. So I can take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public testimony, open it up for council comments or questions. Councilman Tupper.
What was budgeted for an increase? I'm sure you budget every year for an increase, but was this close to
I
what
usually
was?
go for about a 10%. I try to give plenty of room, just because it is there again. You never know what the property valuations and what the market kind of insurance is doing. So my standard 10%, I still feel comfortable with this.
Yep, not totally out of line then.
Yep.
Any follow-up, Councilman Tupper? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Finance Officer Bob Zane. Are the utilities for sure going to be part of this? Because I know they've been talking about breaking away and also looking at other options out there. So
for this renewal, just because it is due now, the plan, and I've talked to Adam at Watertown Municipal Utilities, is we will be staying together for this and diving into this next round of really getting what that cost looks like, not only for the utilities, but also for the city, so that everybody's well aware of what that split would look like. So that's the plan.
Any follow-up, Councilman?
So what is the policy period on this? Is this a calendar year or?
It goes August, it'll be effective August 1st of 2021. And then our next renewal is August 1st of 2022.
Okay, so for the period that's starting now, the
Yep.
utilities is on board?
They're with us.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further council comments or questions? Seeing none, the motion is to approve the policies and payment for premiums. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is approval for the professional services agreement for services associated with the Willow Creek Sub-Basin Drainage Study Update with Ulteg Engineers Incorporated in the amount of $9,200 and authorize the city manager to sign all applicable documents. We'll open up public testimony by going to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry, we do need a motion. Sorry about that. Thank you. Motion by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Schutte. Thank you. Now public testimony going to our Public Works Director.
Thank you. Staff has at its disposal a drainage study from Ulteg Engineering that was performed back in 2007, and it's specific to the industrial park just northeast of I-29 and Highway 212. That drainage study was fairly comprehensive at the time, and it provided a lot of good guidance and potential regional detention ponds as those areas of land develop over time. And what we found is that some of the recommendations in the study weren't followed to a T, and what we'd like to do is provide an update to that study to kind of get a handle on where we're at today as things continue to develop particularly in the industrial park northeast of that intersection of I-29 and 212. So what this update to the study does is looks at, I'll pull it up on a map, I think that'll be easiest to help describe it. It looks at a certain area, excuse me, within that drainage basin and a particular sub-basin that's seen most of the development within it in the last 10, 12 years. So this area highlighted in blue is the area that Ulteg would do an update to. Everything outlined in red is what their original study from 2007 entailed. And of course this area in blue is where we primarily seen most of the new development out here in the industrial park areas. The study, again, it highlights a series of regional ponds throughout this whole basin, and we have a regional pond in existence within this blue area, and there were several others noted in the study that were recommended as potential regional detention ponds, some of which we've allowed development in those areas. And so those are some of the impacts that we'd like OLTEG to take a look at and provide an update to the study so that we know best how to manage further development and growth in the community in this particular area. I will note that there's also interest by current landowners in this area to see this study update performed due to potential interest in some city properties in the area. So that is one of the reasons that's brought this updated report forward to staff and then now to the council. So again, the fee for this was not to exceed $9,200, and we feel that's fairly reasonable for the updated information OLTEG will be providing us. With that, Justin Peterson's online, and he and I can help answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this item? Seeing none, we will close public testimony and open it up for questions or comments from the council. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my first question is, why are we only doing these subbasins?
This subbasin highlighted in blue is specific to the area that's impacting some of the properties in question that I mentioned that some of the current landowners had interest in potentially utilizing. That was one of the reasons of focusing that area. The other reason being, as I described, a lot of the development that's occurred where we've allowed development on areas that were planned for regional detention ponds are within this basin as well. And those are some of the impacts we'd really like to get a handle on to see how we should be managing future growth in this area, whether it's through on-site detention or modifying the location of the proposed regional ponds or things of that nature.
Any follow-up, Councilman?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Director Von Eye. I know this study pretty well from working here before, and I guess my thought is, why won't we just update the whole drainage study instead of just one portion of it? And obviously I know that comes with increased costs, but if we're going to update a study with the way our city is growing and the potential for growth in this city, I guess my comment, it's not really a question now, is why won't we look at doing a general update to the whole study?
Wasn't a question. I would open it up for an answer if you wanted to provide one, but you don't have to. Director?
I think that merits some follow-up. That I guess my comment to that, Councilman Paulson, would be I don't believe that we've seen as much disruption to the plan, if you will, in all these other sub-basin areas. So I'm not sure that an entire comprehensive update would necessarily be warranted just due to that fact. I think that we've more or less either not seen development or any disruption of the original plan, and things are kind of as they were back in 2007. Again, I don't know that in great detail, but that's my overall impression of this area, is that most of the disruption and modifications have been in that blue area that we're seeking to update now today.
Any follow-up, Councilman? See none. Any further questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, the motion is to approve the agreement. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up on the agenda is a presentation of the results of the 2020 Sanitary Sewer Capacity Model conducted by HDR Incorporated. I believe we actually have, this is just a presentation, and I think that we have HDR Incorporated with us tonight.
Yes, correct, Mayor. Would you like me to tee this up? Or
please do,
hand it off them?
Director Von Eye.
Thank you, Mayor. We did enter into contract back in 2020 with HDR in February of 2020, and they were to perform a sanitary sewer capacity model for the wastewater collection system. Some of the things that sparked interest in seeing this model is just general growth and development throughout the community. We'd oftentimes have questions about sewer capacities in engineering office or the wastewater division of public works wouldn't necessarily have clear answers for them. So we knew one of the ways to obtain better information would be through a comprehensive sewer study for the entire city. With that, we have HDR on the line with us. I believe Scott Humphrey from HDR, who did a lot of the brunt of the work on this model, is with us this evening and can walk through some slides that they have prepared and talk about some of the highlights from the study. Scott, are you online with us?
Yes, I am. Good evening.
Mr. Humphrey, if you would like to take it away, please do.
Yes, did my presentation come through?
Not yet. Are you sharing your screen?
It says I'm sharing. Oh, sorry, I had to pick one more button. Now it's coming through a bit.
Okay, we see it now. Thank you.
Okay, great. So good evening. I'm Scott Humphrey from HDR, and I am here to talk about the 2020 sanitary sewer capacity model and results of the analysis. So I've prepared a high-level presentation here. I've got about 5 or 6 slides. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I'll open it up to questions at the end, and I'd be happy to go into as much detail as you would like. So what I'm going to talk about this evening is a quick project overview, and then I'm going to talk about the existing 2020 capacity results, and then we forecasted the model to the future 2035. I'm going to talk about those capacity results, and then talk about the next steps from here, what you can do with the model and what we should be using it for moving forward. So a project overview quickly, the city went out to RFP, as was mentioned. They wanted to develop a hydraulic model that could evaluate capacity not only today, but in the future as development comes in and wants to connect to the sanitary sewer system. So what we did is we developed a hydraulic model in InfoSewer format using your GIS data. We went out and collected flow monitoring data at a series of metering points at 8 points to calibrate the model. And then once a model was calibrated, we used that to perform an existing capacity analysis. And then we took those calibrated factors and forecasted them into the future based on land use and did a future 2035 capacity analysis. So here are the results of the existing system calibrated model. And we found that there were about 14 pipe capacity limitations. Those are highlighted in red throughout the system. And at the time we did the study, there were no pump station capacity limitations. Now, subsequent to the study, we had a request from Stony Point to add 68,000 gallons per day upstream of lift station 12, which flows into lift station 11, which is on the northwest side of the figure near the lake. And what we found there is that that development would actually exceed the capacity of 12, and 12 flows into 11, so it would actually exceed the capacity of 11 as well. So that was the existing system, and then we moved forward to the future 2035 system. And when we run peak wet weather flows through this system, as can be expected with future flows based on what's projected to build out today, we've got a number of additional pipe capacity limitations. Now we're at 27 instead of just 14, so almost double. And we're starting to hit our limit on some pump station capacities. Lift station 11, 13, and 23 are hitting their limits. And those will need to, one of the next steps would be to figure out what actually is needed to mitigate those limitations and develop some capital improvement program and plan in place to do that. So last slide real quick is where do we go from here? What are the next steps? So the first thing would be to do some additional field verification of elevation data in our sewer model, which is invert elevations and rim elevations. We had to make some assumptions based on the data we had, so it would be good to go back in the future as we can and collect some of that data and validate and get it into the model. The other thing here, which I probably should have mentioned up front, is because of the data that we had, we decided to do a trunk system model, which was basically 12-inch mains and greater, and then some pump stations for connectivity that we were interested in. So one of the next steps also would be to start to fill in some of the model with some of these non-trunk mains, and then maybe even more pump stations and facilities upstream. So start to fill in the model. And one of the things that we did tying this to GIS is we made sure that as new data is collected and as we could update this model and basically fill it in without much effort. We also want to update future projections. We were using your general plan or land use data, and as new data becomes available, as specific development comes into town, you have specific plan information, we'd want to get that into the model and analyze that. And probably the biggest benefit for the hydraulic model is that now you have a tool that you can use to analyze future growth. As future growth comes in, you can load this to this model and basically tell what is needed to accommodate that growth from now into the future. And with that, I will open it up to any detailed questions you have.
Thank you very much. Councilman Danforth.
Scott, I do have a question for you. There's been a long-standing, I'll call it theory, or maybe it's factual, that on the north side of the lake, Compesca, as it heads westward and then southwestward, that there is not enough sewer capacity there for future development. Does this study indicate that to be true, or what would it take for growth to occur in those areas in order to be able to handle the sewer capacity?
Well, what we would need to do is start to expand this model out around the lake and fill this in with pump station capacities and the data. Now the nice thing about our model is that even though we skeletonized it, we have run all of the flows that would have flown through these facilities into this pump station. So they did get point loaded and flowed downstream. So we have assessed what all the growth around the lake will do in the areas that we modeled, but what we haven't assessed, and it sounds like your question is the detailed specifics of these pump stations and facilities around the lake.
That's correct. I know that there's been questions over time about potential development in those areas, and again, going through recollection without a lot of specific details to who and exactly what was said, but I think the general feeling is that those areas should not be developed because of sewer capacities. And it would be interesting to know really where we do sit on that and what it would take at some point to look at what it would take to expand our capacities for development out in some of those peripheral areas out on by the lake.
Right. So that would probably be my recommendation for, when I say next steps here on filling in this, what we didn't model is let's start to look at where are the high priority items or the areas that you're most interested in, and we can start to fill in the data gaps and put that data in.
Thank you. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Humphrey, was I&I part of this study?
It was not. We had a limited flow monitoring period, so we did 2 weeks of dry weather flow calibration, and unfortunately with 2 weeks, it's usually not enough time to get a storm. If we were lucky enough to get a storm during those 2 weeks, we could have done some I&I, but I guess the short answer is no, we didn't do an exhaustive I&I study for this location, for this at this time.
Actually, the mayor will take the hit for this. What is I&I?
Infiltration and inflow. It's basically the rainfall that gets back into the sewer, either through cracks or leaks, or sometimes illicit connections, sump drain connections, or roof drain connections. So basically anything that's not sanitary sewer that gets into the collection system.
Thank you. I would say that question was for the public, but I'd be lying. It's for me and possibly other people up here. Any follow-up, Councilman Paulson?
Yes, thank you. I do have one other follow-up on that then is how often do you see that affect the capacity when not studying it, if at all?
I think, well, it's two parts. So there's the bad news and the good news. The bad news is the INI typically affects the system quite a bit. Now the good news is what we did with this model is with those dry weather flows, we developed a peak factor equation for you. So we're peaking these dry weather flows through a steady state model, which is relatively conservative. So even though we didn't do an exhaustive INI study to start to dive into the details of routing a storm through the system, we did run a peak factor equation and accounted for wet weather flows above and beyond the sanitary.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Councilman? Any other questions or comments? Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question on the lift stations. Do they have to be replaced? They were talking about the 3 that are at capacity right now. Do they modify those, or do they have to actually replace the whole lift station?
Scott, I believe you guys provided some recommendation for improvements there in the executive summary as well. Do you want to speak to that? Generally speaking, my knowledge of that, Councilman Bueller, would be that it depends. It's kind of circumstantial. Sometimes existing lift stations can be modified by upsizing the pumps and things of that nature, but there are times where they've met their useful life and you're just as good, better off to reconstruct the entire thing. But specifically to these ones, Scott, or even Mike for that matter, Mike Berger, the wastewater superintendent's online with us, I'd let them to speak to that as well.
Mr. Berger, would you like to say anything, or Mr. Humphrey?
Yeah, I can talk to that. Go ahead.
Yes, what we do, for example, right now, lift station 43 on South Highway 81, that lift station has quite a bit of capacity, but over time we've developed a lot of information on it. And we know that the limiting factor to that lift station is simply would be to increase the force main. So in conjunction with the project that we're doing next year, we will upsize that force main while we're digging in the area, which will actually allow that lift station to have more future capacity. But sometimes it's a matter of pumps, and when you get a real grade increase through a certain basin, then the lift station itself, the wet well, might have to be upsized at some point. But that would be in a severe situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, we will thank all of you for your presentation and your work on this, and we will ask if there's any old business. Councilman Danforth.
I assume this is old business, but I want to go back to the way we started our meeting today, and that was with the senior center. Historically, we have owned that building, and we have had certain contractual obligations to maintain that building to some extent, if I remember correct. What are the new terms going to be when they get into their new building? What will we have obligations to?
Would our city attorney, Matt Roby, like to address this?
I can speak maybe generically about it, but generally, once they move into Jesse's, our generations on first, the city's obligation to the seniors will formally cease in regards to that 99-year lease.
And is there I'm sorry, Mayor, is there anything else other than the lease, the property that we're obligated to now that we either will continue or won't continue? Are you aware?
Not that I'm aware of. There might be, I don't know if TK's on. I know that there is some sort of formal or informal relationship amongst the park department and the senior center. I believe that they help facilitate some events with them, and I'm not sure the extent of that relationship, but I expect that would continue. Yeah. So I think that would probably continue. But as far as our owning and being responsible for the space itself, we would, our obligations to them are going to cease once they transfer into that new space. Now, as far as their request tonight, that, obviously that doesn't prevent the council from taking action to help them out in some way, but there's nothing contractually obligating us to it.
Councilman Tupper.
Excuse me, City Finance Officer Bob Zine. What have we typically provided for them in a year in a dollar value? Maybe you don't have that right off the top of your head.
I don't have it off the top. Thank you, Councilman Tupper. I don't have it off the top of my head. I do know that we do contribute to ICAP, but I don't think we've actually ever given anything to the Senior Citizen Center as far as an external organization contribution. But I do know that we have put dollars forth to help maintain that building. I know we did some roof work and we've done some of the other upgrades as per the lease. So I think sometimes that's when they've come to us, is if there's more of the maintenance and upkeep of the building, where our contributions have come in.
And that will all fall under Craig Properties from now on, correct?
Yeah, it'll be a different lease agreement on that property than with the city, is my understanding.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further comments on this topic, I guess? Councilman Beeler, are your comments on this topic?
Kind of. They sort of relate to that, I guess.
We'll grant you leniency.
Well, I just want to thank Darla for these really good. Darla Villauer, thank you very much. But I don't know, that kind of relates in there maybe. There's food over there. So, but no, I do want to comment on just another issue that in regards to what our current discussion, that's the 55 plus dining. Just to kind of come up, bring everybody up to speed, I think I'd mentioned before we were looking at trying to utilize the equipment that exists currently at the old facility. And last week I met with the Park and Rec Director Terry Kelly. Park and Rec Director Terry Kelly was there. Other representatives from the zoo as well as Park and Rec. And it looks as though a lot of that equipment will be usable in other locations. Potentially the hood and the suppression system, along with the stainless steel tables, and there's numerous refrigeration units and freezers that it looks like we'll be able to utilize in other areas with the Park and Rec Department. So, and the zoo, thank you, which is part of the Park and Rec. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilman Tupper?
Just to clarify, part of that is the money that the council has given to that project already, and the equipment that Bruce is talking about is property of ICAP with the 60s plus dining, and not the actual senior citizen center, although they do fall under the same roof. So, and they will in the new facility.
Councilman Vilhauer?
But are they not getting the benefit of the use of that new equipment, though, in providing the meals that they will consume on those premises?
Yes.
I'm a little confused on the relationship there.
Well, ICAP serves the meals at the Senior Citizen Center, which also does the 60s plus dining and Meals on Wheels and all that. They just coexist in the same facility. Senior Citizen Center's activities for basically the senior citizens. So, I mean, there is a differential there, but yes, they do share a lot of the same. I mean, ICAP provides meals for the seniors while they're there. So,
okay, and that was
Senior Center provides the activities, and with the Park and Rec Department, it does come in and actually do some senior activities also.
And that was what, 95,000 that we approved here a 3 months ago, along with Jesse kicking in what, 50,000 on that. I thought it was more than that, but anyway.
It was different. The contribution from Craig LLC or Jesse Craig, I think there might have been more than one. The one reference tonight was for some equipment in the new senior center, and that was different than the appropriation that we as a city made regarding some of the kitchen equipment that was going to ICAP previously. I believe I'm right on this.
Yeah, that's correct. Both me and Mayor Holeen were at that meeting here a month or so ago, and Jesse actually kicked in $15,000 for their new bingo equipment, and he is installing a new dance floor for him on his dime also. So, plus a lot of labor. So,
Councilman Paulson.
I guess, was this not actually a formal request at this point, but I get the feeling that they are going to come back and ask for this 23,000.
City manager, please.
Sure. I had responded to Councilman Tupper late last week that if they had wanted to come and make a request to the city, that they needed to submit it in writing to the finance officer, and that we would bring it to council for discussion. I think the number that that had been presented was $6,000. They were going to ask for a $6,000 contribution towards this $23,000 shortage. But I'll let Councilman Tupper fill in the rest of the details.
Yes, originally the discussion with the city manager and the mayor was at the 6,000 because I kind of took wants and needs analysis with them. I've been helping them trying to raise some money for this. Really needing the $6,000 to get the new TVs in. Of course, they run into, which I wasn't aware of till today with the software, the electrical part of it or whatever. You know, I just basically approached them. What do you guys need? What do you guys need to go into this building? What can we do at a later date, you know, to upgrade some of the other stuff? So my recollection with the conversation was about $6,000, but that's, like I say, before they came up with the internet or whatever it was that they needed to spend money on.
Councilman Paulson?
Well, I guess that's kind of what I was getting at is what is a want and need for this? Because, you know, when she was going through the list, I don't know anything about the senior center, hopefully for obvious reasons. But, you know, there
out of order.
But there just seemed to be, you know, they're asking for 4 smart TVs, and then they're also asking for 2 TVs just for the Wii systems, and it's like, you know, that was going to be my comment, is there seems to be a lot of wants and not necessarily needs at this point, but yeah, I guess if it's not the full 20.
Would you like to say anything? City Manager Mack would like to say something.
Sorry, I have a question. Do you want us as staff to take this as a request and prepare it for the next agenda for your discussion, or do they need to submit something else in writing for a specific amount that they want from the city?
I guess it would be
How do you want us to proceed with this?
It would be my interpretation that a formal request would have to be made by the organization to the city staff. Barring that, it could also appear on the agenda if 2 council people wanted to place it on the agenda. But I would ask that a specific amount would be requested, and for what? Because that would definitely be part of the debate, is what is a want, what is a need. Councilman Tupper and myself were both aware of some of the things that are going on and the money that they're trying to raise. I allowed some leeway for Val Gronke to come and testify, in part to hope that the community might see this and help come forward with donations, because I do believe that this would be a good community asset, and I don't necessarily think that it is the city's responsibility, however, to pay for all of this, but that can be a debate among the full council, and I believe it might be. But that was my desire, is to alert the public as to what's going on with the senior center and possibly raise some awareness so that they can help raise some money and then see what happens after that. There was no formal action at this. Councilman Tupper.
And if it's fine with everybody else, I'll reach out to Val in the next couple of days and kind of sit down with her again and try to get an exact number on a wants and needs, you know, and of course it's all needs. Of course we all want, if we built a new house, we'd all want all new furniture, but wants and needs are 2 different things. So I will reach out to her and see what we can formally get together. And
thank you very much. Councilman Danforth?
Along those lines, will we be dealing with this then in the 2022 budget process and an allocation on at that point? Because or is that coming before
It'd be a budget amendment.
for 2021? Okay, one of the things I think that we should do though is like we do with everybody else that we fund on outside is we do look for a, what's the word I want to use, a transparency in regards to like their assets, if they've got savings and, you know, their financials, if whatever that is, so that we have a statement of knowing where they're at to know what we should be doing. We do that with everybody else, and we should have that same thing here.
Thank you very much. Councilman Tupper.
I wouldn't disagree with that, Mike, but this won't be a yearly deal that they're coming up with. You know, we won't put them on an external organization as they haven't been in the past neither, so.
Councilman Danforth, a reply to that?
Yeah, even if it's not yearly, Randy, I think we still need to know what their financials are if we're going to be giving away taxpayer dollars to something, whether it's annual or whether it's a one-time offer. I think we have that obligation to the taxpayers to know who we're giving our money to and what their financial standing is.
I wouldn't totally disagree with that, so.
And this was old business, but on this one, not that this was getting contentious or anything, but in the future, when there's conversation like this, it should still go through the chair to make certain that if a question does not want to be answered or things like that, but on more contentious issues going forward, I think that would be more appropriate. So just wanted to advise the council on that, but City Manager Meck?
Mayor, do you think that there'll be disagreement?
I would say, I wouldn't hazard. I do not know. I'm surprised at the other things that have raised questions. You never know. So, any further comments on that particular order of business? See none. Is there any other old business? Councilman Vilhauer.
Anything to share on the ice arena since the last couple of weeks now?
Actually, I'll let City Manager Mack take that.
I should have addressed that. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councilman Vilhauer. Just what we had reported in our biweekly leadership update to the council. Continue to communicate with Dick Strasberg. We're looking at August 9th and 10th to go and tour ice facilities. I did send an email to all of you prior to this meeting. Both of our council committee members are unable to attend, so we're looking for at least one other elected official who might be able to go on those dates. I don't have the full schedule or places that we're going from Dick yet, but we do have confirmed members of the Park and Rec staff, the Figure Skating Association, and Hockey Association who will be attending. It's going to be a pretty full couple of days, and Dick will have assignments for everyone on what they're supposed to look at and get input on, and then we'll probably have more of a report after that.
Councilman Beeler would like to add something.
Just a question in that regard. I know that first off, Glenn and I have been fairly intimately involved with this whole process, and unfortunately, neither one of us are going to be able to attend. I know I had talked to Dick Strasberg a little bit last week, and Amanda, I think you and I had that discussion as well about potentially moving that date. Is that still possible? Because in my discussion with Dick, he said, yeah, we need to move that out. So I don't know what happened since then.
Well, we're on a public meeting. We can continue to look at it if we need to change the date. I do know that just with the outside organizations that are attending, those dates worked for them. So I guess I'll take direction from you all. If you would prefer that we try to find some later dates, we can do that.
I think that could be something that could be dealt with tomorrow or the next couple days while we talk about this. To explain to the public, what's going on is members of representing the city of Watertown and our owner's representative, Dick Strasberg of Tegra Group, are going to be visiting several ice arenas in the area to find out what we want, what we need, what is desirable, and this will impact the cost of the arena when we get it back, because as everyone will know, we hired an architect to come back to us with a cost, and that will let us know what we either need to add to this proposal or subtract from it. And the experience that we gain on this arena tour will be invaluable on telling us what the city of Watertown wants and needs or doesn't want and need in a nice arena, and how that will affect the overall project cost. So the two items are working together in order to move this project forward. Any further old business? Seeing none, is there new business? Councilman Vilhauer.
I know there's things going on behind the scenes, but nothing that has been said to the public, and I'm getting a fair amount of questions about a medical marijuana issue. Looking at you, Manager Mack, do you want to say
City
anything about
Manager
that?
Mack, take it.
Well, I'm going to look at City Attorney Roby to provide an update on that. I will say there's an internal working group who has spent a considerable amount of time vetting potential regulations around medical marijuana, looking at proposed rules from the state and how they may apply to the city. Matt can give a better update on where we're at in the actual process of that.
City Attorney Roby.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I would ask you, do you want me to outline any of the substance yet, or just
No,
kind of with the timeline?
I'm sorry, no, I think more of a timeline,
Okay.
Matt.
I think there's a final meeting in the next couple of days of that subcommittee. And then I believe there's going to be at the Plan Commission this week, will be the first time it'll kind of be explained publicly what we're tentatively looking at or proposing. The first formal action or formal proposal will occur at the second council meeting of August, where there'll be a first reading of the ordinance, and then in between that first reading and second reading at that Plan Commission is where the Plan Commission will consider and approve the ordinance. What kind of got a little bit goofed up here is the state had until the end of October to create and adopt their rules, and they've actually moved quite quicker than we expected them to move, and so the timelines got a little bit compressed in order for us to get our rules in place prior to the adoption. And we're expecting right now that the state's rules will be effective October 4th, and so we've had to compress our timeline a bit to make sure our ordinances are effective on or before that date.
And Councilman Roby, Councilman, City Attorney Roby, would you just provide a very quick explanation to anyone listening, the difference between the medical marijuana and the recreational use marijuana, and why the city is moving on one and not the other at this time?
Well, as of right now, adult use is the term that we're using now, and rather than recreational is the term the legislature is going to be using. Amendment A is still under consideration with the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court upholds the judge in Peer, Amendment A will not go into effect. And so, assuming that to be the case, the only thing that will be legal in South Dakota will be medical marijuana at this time. Now, some communities are considering, the potential inevitability of adult use marijuana and kind of crafting their ordinances to reflect that. I suspect our ordinances are going to end up being crafted specifically at medical use marijuana, just because of the unknown about what the adult use process is going to look like. In addition, the legislature's meeting in November, and we're expecting them to bring some tweaks to to IM26, the current legislative scheme. We're expecting there to be some proposals at the legislature in November that could create some changes immediately to the program. So I think at this point we're addressing simply medical marijuana and not adult use marijuana.
Thank you very much. And City Manager Mack and I, as well as some council people and staff, have been in contact with representatives from the state and the District 5 legislators to discuss and prepare for this going forward. So, any further new business? Seeing none, are there liaison member reports? Councilman Vilhauer.
Sorry about that, everybody. Had an interesting municipal utility board meeting last Monday, and a number of things I think the public might be interested to be made aware of. First of all, with the extreme heat and drought that we are experiencing, because I know there's even a question to, I think it was addressed to you at KXLG last week. As far as water and electricity usage, what we were being told at the meeting last week is they're holding their own. Don't anticipate any kind of rationing or anything of that nature relative to water and electricity use, so good shape there. Everybody has probably seen the charging stations out at Hy-Vee. I think the understanding initially was that those would only be able to be utilized by those owning Tesla vehicles. That apparently is not the case, and Randy, looks like you're agreeing with me on that. So those charging stations would be available to the general public if you have an electric car, so I'll just pass that on. The utilities had a record month of billings last month. They billed over $5 million in billings for the month of June. I think probably the expectation is July is probably going to even top that, again, because of the extreme heat and drought and the electrical usage and the water usage. So a good month, outstanding month. And the last item that I'm kind of saving for the end, because it's probably of the most substance, is there was a recent change to their policies relative to water main installation. If I'm understanding it, starting in 2021 now, the utilities will be passing on the cost of water main installation or cost sharing it with the developer. And that is going to be a rather dramatic change for developers. Now, it is being phased in 2021. Those costs will only be 20% incurred by the developer, 2022, 40%, until up by 2025, the developer will be bearing 100% of the cost of those water main installations, and presumably the developer will then have to pass those costs on to the ultimate property owner. So that will be something that could have an impact upon development and ultimate homeowners here in Watertown, but their board did pass that policy change here very recently.
Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I am going to speak on that as well, coming from the development side. That is alarming from the development community. It's something that we tried to push back on a little bit, and we were met with pretty much great force by their leaders saying, don't even go there. This is our decision, and this is what we decided. And I do think it is going to have an effect on our community, a negative effect, actually. And I talked about this with Glenn a little bit, too, previously, is it's going to start affecting the relationship between developers and the city even more than it has. And I think trying to work on that relationship is going to be key, not only from the city side of things into the utilities, but I just wanted to touch base with a little bit on this, because you're going to see lot increases. The costs are already going up by a couple $1,000s per lot, because we're only doing 20% this year. If we were to actually phase it in like we were intending to, it would have been a lot larger than that per lot. And I guess it's something that I feel like should be part of a larger discussion, at least with the utilities. And I know that our relationship is already not great with the utilities. That's the feeling I get. But it's affecting the relationship with developers as well.
Thank you. Any further comments? Liaison reports? Are there any announcements? We have no need for executive session pursuant to South Dakota Codified Law 125-2. So with that, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Schutte. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries.